let me tell you a bit about who you're going to be hearing from. So first we have Dr. Philip Lanoue. He's the superintendent. He's led the Clarke County School District in Athens in Georgia since July of 2009. Under his leadership, the district has been honored as a Title I Distinguished District for closing the achievement gap. The district is also a state model technology school district, one of the NAM's top communities in music education, and home to 6 international baccalaureate world schools. He was previously the area assistant superintendent for Clarke County School District, and he received his PhD from Mercer University, his master's and bachelor's degrees from the University of Vermont, and he is also an adjunct assistant professor at the University of Georgia. Dr. Lanoue is here to talk about his work on closing the achievement gap and all the different strategies and success stories he's had in Clarke County. After Dr. Lanoue, we'll hear from Christina Patel. Christina has been teaching for 4 years, all of them in Clarke County, as an 8th grade math teacher at the Clarke Middle School. In her time there, she's been influenced by many passionate coworkers. They've helped her refine her teaching philosophy of a student-centered classroom. She's a graduate of the University of Georgia, degree in secondary math, and she's working on her M.Ed in the same field. She will be speaking to us about practical applications of implementing productive struggle as a practice in the classroom, its benefits, and you should be able to walk away with really great tools for how to implement this in your own classroom or how to work with teachers on how to implement this in their classroom. Finally, we're going to meet with Aoife Dempsey. Aoife is the CTO at Triumph Learning. She spent her career at the intersection of technology and education, working in professional, higher ed, and K-12 environments to deliver modern teaching and learning solutions. She will be introducing a digital smart practice system called Waggle that encourages productive struggle, that fosters and motivates success in proficiency and advancement for learners in 3 through 8 for ELA and mathematics. So hopefully you'll stick around to hear everything all these wonderful people have to say. Please feel free to post questions into the text chat, and I'll be sure to save them, and we'll work them into a QA at the very end of the session. And I'm going to move the slide. I forgot. I have to explain to you our good definition of productive struggle. So at Triumph Learning, we believe that if we allow students to explore tasks that are slightly beyond their reach with appropriate support, that students experiencing this type of struggle can be quite productive in gaining confidence as long as the environment is safe and it's positive, so we can foster a motivation for making errors in a safe environment and standing right back up and keeping at it, that this is a main tenet of the learning process. So we are going to hear from 3 different presenters, as I've said, about this concept of it's okay to fall down, we just have to learn that getting back up is essential to the learning process. And now I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Lanoue, who's going to get started for us.
Let me start that again. My name is Philip Lanoue. I'm Superintendent of the Clarke County School District. And I want to talk to you about how you begin to think about and how do you actually put in place practices to close the achievement gap. And let me just paint a perspective, at least where we were coming from, and I'm really glad today of the work that we've done so far, but also with the partnership that we've had with Triumph Learning. The Clarke County School District is not a large district by some of the metro standards. We're 13,000 students in 21 schools. And we're here in Clarke County, which is home to Athens, which is home to University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. And so some would say if you're a college to university district, you have a certain demographic with your students. Well, to put it in perspective, the Clarke County is considered one of the most impoverished counties per capita in the country. So with that brings some challenges. So we have great kids with great challenges. And our goal was how do we close the achievement gap, because we are all Title I schools and we're about 82% minority, 55% being African American and about 28% Hispanic. And just to give you a starting point, in 2004, the graduation rate for African American students in Clarke County was 35%. So you can see there was a lot of work to do. And so how do you begin to go about doing that work? Well, we have to look at things differently. And one of those is that you really have to have practices for a new day, because it is a new day, and every day is a new day. And I certainly can remember talking way back when about a futurist that you no longer can predict the future based on the events of the past. And I think that's more so every day today as our world is changing quickly, and it's changing quickly with our students. So what I want to talk to you about is components of the holistic way in which we've approached improving performance and closing the achievement gap. And we've had tremendous success, and with that I say we still got tremendous gaps, but I don't think the work will ever be done. The first piece I want to talk about is how you take risk. It's pretty easy to say that all students can learn, but it's much harder to put in place practices that ensures that happen. And how do you take risk with our students? I recently spoke to our faculties at all of our 21 schools over the last 2 weeks, as we're going through a one-to-one rollout that I'll talk about with computers starting to come next week in grades 3 through 9, so it's about 8,000 or 9,000 students. And they talk about, what is it about that rollout? And my piece is, if we can't take a risk with our students and their learning, then who are we as educators? And I think we have to approach that when we really want to try new things. So our piece has been taking risk and hoping kids can succeed, because we say that all the time. We ask students to take risk, and oftentimes we watch them fail or say somewhere along the way that they couldn't do that. So here's a couple of ways. First, we're an international baccalaureate middle school programs. We just got approved this past summer for our east side and west side schools. So that's 6 schools. If you can think about that, all of our 6th graders now engage in a second language. I think if we had talked about that 5 years ago, people would laugh, and now they embrace that. And so we've taken risks with our kids in International Baccalaureate. The other one in there, I show a chart that shows dual enrollment. We have a career academy, and we made some major changes by contracting with the local technical college and university, where we said our kids can start to take college credit at age 16. In fact, could get an associate's degree when they walk across the stage, absolutely free. We pay for it. And what they said is that our kids couldn't do it. And we said, yeah, they can. They can if we really want them to, and they can if we put the right things in place. So to give you a perspective, in 2012, for those that know dual enrollment credit, which is credit for college and high school at the same time, we had 84 dual enrollment credits given in 2012. And you can see, and I'm going to use subgroup because I think it's very relative, that we had 13 credits given to African American students and 10.5 to our Hispanic students. And so you can see that was pretty disproportional. I'm really pleased that in 2004, we said, come on, we had 191.5 credits given to our African American students, 372 total, and 36 credits to our Hispanic students. So when we say our kids can't do it, let's take risk with them and let's see if they can get there. And there's another chart I want to mention about taking risks, because I think it's relative. This past year, we moved biology to 9th grade from 10th grade, didn't know what to do with high school physical science. We went and said, let's offer it in 8th grade. Now we're about 94% free reduced hot lunch in our middle schools, and we said, okay, let's offer to our kids. There's one prerequisite, and we said they want to take high school physical science in 8th grade. No, I don't care if they failed. I don't care where the reading level is. If they want to take it and give it a try, they can do it. We had the end of course test, which is required in our state, and out of 235 students, which is 235 of 800, took high school physical science. We had 229 pass the end of course test, and 195 of 235 scored 90% or better. That's in a place where people said they couldn't do it. So it's really important, I think, in this world to take risk, and as we're going to move forward in many different ways. We also talk about investing in personalized digital learning systems. And I think that's where our relationship with Triumph Learning really grew, and also with the State Department of Ed, in which we're doing a collaborative now on creating a learning tool and a repository for materials and content. But I think there's a huge shift now going into personalized learning, and if I can describe it this way, I think where probably most schools are at a place where you'd have instruction in your classroom, and then you'd probably have some digital learning system on the side that would say, well, if you don't get in my classroom, go on this learning system and you'll catch up. And that's really around remediation. what we're talking about in personalized learning system is to bring that into the classroom. That ought to be central to what we do. And I'm not saying the program, but the practice of actually creating personalized systems for kids where you can give them immediate feedback. And I think we're really working hard for us in linking that personalized learning systems into efficacy. And that's something we want from our students to really understand about their own learning. So I think you can talk about personalized digital learning systems and efficacy. They're the same. As I said, we're really excited that we're a one-to-one initiative in grades 3 through 9 and probably finish off with 10 this year. We put together a system our kids will be taking their devices home, and we use a Google platform amongst other platforms, and it's really changed the way our kids learn. And if it doesn't change the way they learn, I say just use textbooks, but it's got to really change instruction. Educating healthy children, for those out there that have systems like ours, we have to have healthy children, and we're in a large movement now to look at how we get health care for our children, working with the food banks. We already provide about 8,000 meals a day and breakfasts for our kids. So I think it's really healthy. It's really important. If you want to go to the last piece, you got to pay attention to the health of children, and that's something I think we're on the front end of. The other is forging partnerships. And I think when we talk about education, partnerships are sometimes short-term and sometimes aren't well-defined. And what I would say is in communities now, you really have to overlap resources. I don't think any agency anymore can do it alone. So we forged ahead with a number of partnerships. One I've talked about with Athens Technical College, where we have students now that gain dual enrollment credit, and they're starting their college at age 16. We're also a professional development school district. We started 5 years ago partnering with the University of Georgia. We have 7 professors in residence, which means half of their time is with us on projects. I'm really pleased to see that we're really working hard to bridge that gap between practice and research, and both have both feet in each camp. And if someone says anything, that brings 550 students into our schools every day who are working collaboratively with teachers. We've worked hard with local agencies. In this midst of budget reductions and performance in the content area, we have expanded our arts. We believe that's important, from orchestra and band, and we work locally with AFES, a local community that's been incredibly supportive. If people don't know Athens and REM, obviously it's a very music-oriented town, and we also offer strings in 7 locations for elementary students, and we do a band project in about 4 of the elementary schools. And then, of course, the last piece is probably the most important, is how do we create the right environments? And we're very data-driven here, but you have to understand that every data point has a face, and if it doesn't have a face, it really doesn't mean that much to us. We have to put our kids' face to it. But we're involved in a collaborative planning model where all of our teachers collaboratively plan either by grade level or by discipline. We build time in. We built 14 professional days this year into our calendar to ensure that our teachers had the time to do so. We use a data team process where we do pre and post assessments. We talk about strategies. We use data frequently. We use digital dashboards, and that's why it was so important with Triumph, because we began to look at ways and develop ways in which we could use real-time, immediate information and feedback for frequent monitoring. We're also tying that into our professional development. We create summer institutes that are involving just about 50 to 60% of our faculty, actually creating a cadre of experts. We actually are working on creating a cadre of experts with our students. If you want to look at some of the results that we've had as results, this is over the last 5 years, and for us, we look at the 5th grade and 8th grade as 2 of the touch points that are really important. And so we're really pleased. We look at our reading and language arts. We're at 96 and 92% met or exceeded standards in our local CRCT assessments. Of course, it's all changing a bit with the Common Core. But specifically look at our focus areas, and that's been in mathematics. And if you look in 8th grade, you'll see in mathematics we've gone up 28%. I would say most of that it's in our minority population. So, we're real pleased that we're sitting here at 97% reading in our schools, given where we were 5 years ago. And I think it's all to the incredible work of our teachers and school leaders. So with that, you can move on, because I think the next topic is about implementing productive struggles, and that that productive struggle probably extends to not only students but also to teachers as they really look to do their work. But my kudos to our staff and faculty and to the leaders of our district who have made tremendous gains. But with that said, we have a lot of work to do. So I hope that paints at least a base of the work as we move forward in this webinar. But thank you. Okay, next cue.
Hey everyone, thank you Dr. Lanoue for that awesome introduction to what a wonderful school district we have. I am Christina Patel. I teach 8th grade math at Clarke Middle School, which is one of the 4 middle schools in Clarke County. And we have had a lot of changes over the past 4 or 5 years, as Dr. Lanoue highlighted. And a lot of the changes in achievement can be attributed to the productive struggle that our teachers are implementing in the classroom. And there are challenges to do this. It's not an easy process to start, but once you get going, the benefits definitely outweigh the challenges. But some of the challenges to be prepared for as you start using productive struggle in the classroom is the time it takes to be comfortable, and that's for the teachers and the students. It is not an easy process to allow students that time to think. For students, it can be a struggle because they're not used to thinking like that. They have to get comfortable with it. They have to get used to the work it takes. And it requires them to be vulnerable to teachers seeing their thinking processes, even if it's not correct. And for teachers, as we all know, time is of the essence in our classrooms. And when we are sitting there working with students, it's really easy to share with them how to do something instead of letting them figure it out. It also changes the way we plan. As Dr. Lanoue mentioned, we have collaborative planning in Clarke County, and that collaborative planning time really allows us to work through and plan for the struggle to allow students to struggle in our classrooms. And the reason we do all this is because of the outcomes it has for our students. It really changes the way students view themselves as thinkers and as part of the classroom. It increases their self-efficacy. I have students in my class who want to share their work. They're very proud of their work. They'll say, I want to tell you what I did, because it took them a while to get there, and so they're proud of that process. Their willingness to try things that they're not familiar with, things that they may have before put their head down or turned away or started talking with a partner. They've seen themselves be successful, and they want to build on that. More importantly, it creates connections. All the time I'll hear kids say, wait a second, this is like what we just did, or I can think about this in a different way. And so it allows them to really engage with the material we have. And one of the biggest struggles for a teacher in preparing to implement productive struggle is making sure that you're not just winging it. Preparing to allow students to struggle is difficult because you want them to feel protected and safe in the environment. I tell my kids, hey, I know this is going to be difficult. It's supposed to be difficult. When it's difficult, we're learning. If it's always easy, we're not learning. And I also make sure they know that easy is relative. We're not allowed to say the phrase, I am easy in my class. Because if we say I am easy, we're saying it's easy for everybody. And that's not true. Because what's easy for me isn't easy for you. So we have those conversations so that way kids feel safe in their thinking no matter what level they're at. We want to anticipate student difficulties. I know all of us, when we plan, we prepare for what student responses may be and what struggles they may have. So instead of saying what can we do to prevent those difficulties, we want to ask ourselves what can we do to allow students to work through the difficulties. So we want students to feel ready. And the way that I do that in my classroom is through vocabulary previews. They have it available through graphic organizers, having a list of web resources they're welcome to go to if they ever feel stuck, and making sure that students understand that I'm trying to see what they're thinking. Having differentiated resources and making sure that kids are all met on their level. Pre-filled definitions for kids that need that. A list of different web sources at different levels. Because if you ignore the fact that students are at different levels in your classroom, it can really cause frustration. when we provide productive struggle to students, we want to make sure that it's at their level. What's struggle for me isn't struggle for you. Kind of goes back to the what's easy for me isn't easy for you. And then we have talked a lot in education about the importance of feedback. And one of the things that I try to make sure is happening in class is the feedback is something that they can take action on. It's not just a sentence that says whether or not they did good or bad. It requires them to do something. Oh, I like this post. Someone just posted, "What I say in my classroom is you need to embrace the struggle." That's such an awesome phrase. So examples of the way that I give feedback in class. Glows versus grows chart. So I make a little post-it note. One side says glows, the other side says grows, and I stick it on their work. And this allows them to see what they're doing well and where they need to grow. And that grows is usually in a form of a question. So that way they can respond to the question I pose and show that they've grown. Because productive struggle is all about what can you do to show you've gotten better? How can you display that? And another thing that I do in class to really push this is allowing students to resubmit anything that's graded in class. And the reason behind this is if students think that when they turn something in, their learning and their thinking is done, it kind of eliminates that struggle. So allowing them to see that once I finish something, it doesn't mean I've completely learned it. It means I'm getting information back to show me what do I need to do next to show I've learned this either better or more deeply. And some of the examples of questions that I pose for students when they turn in assessment resubmissions is explain what you did and why it needs improvement. Explain how you would make that improvement, and then provide your updated solution. So that students really are going through the step of identifying their mistake, updating their mistake, and then explaining why it was a mistake. And really when we start doing this, we're in the first 3 weeks of school right now at our school. We do this in class until students learn the process of what it means to resubmit. So I know it's very easy to just send this home as an afterthought, but the amount of understanding that kids gain through going back through their work is really important. So that was all about planning for productive struggle and making sure it happened. What it looks like in class is different. And I think it's the most difficult part for teachers because we're so pressed for time. What are you doing in class at every minute? We are always talking about not losing minutes, not doing this, and we want to make sure we're doing that. But at the same time, if students focus on the process of what they're doing, they will end up learning more, even though it takes a longer amount of time. And one of the things I know I'm guilty of, and a lot of teachers are quickly validating correct answers and moving on. When we allow students to explain their thinking and make the focus of our conversation as a teacher on the process versus the answer, it can really increase the amount of student thinking that happens in the classroom. And not telling kids that have incorrect answers that they're wrong. That is so key and so important because any incorrect answer is a pathway to learning. Because when students have an incorrect answer, what they're saying is, I know how to get started with this, but I don't know where to go. Or maybe they're saying, I don't know how to get started with this, but this is what I know. And so it allows you as a teacher to build on what they're doing to kind of guide them along the way. Another important part on focusing on the process is really highlighting different students' thinking and not letting kids think there's just one way to approach something. Because if you're the quiet student sitting in the back of the room and someone explains their reasoning and it doesn't make any sense to you and the teacher says it's right, what's your first thought? What I thought must be wrong. But that's not true. It could be equally as right, so we want to have as many kids share out as possible. And this goes back to providing the safe environment in class where kids feel really comfortable to share. I had a situation this week that kind of got to this focus on a process. This kid came up to the board. He showed his work on the board on how to translate something across the coordinate plane. And I asked him, does that make sense? Can you show us how that worked? He had explained it in words. Can you show us visually how it worked? And when he went up there, he was standing at the board, and as he was doing it, he said, wait a second, it doesn't work. And he got to he got to stand up there and work through his productive struggle with the class, which was really a good way for other students to see his thinking. Allow access to tools. We want to make sure we're not guiding students too much on what to use in class as ways to gather information. We want to prepare them for when they get to choose, what do I need to do to accomplish this task? Not, I know that my teacher is going to hand me the 6 things I need, and I'm going to have to use all 6 of these. So for right now in our class, we're on a geometry unit. So every team of students has a bucket in the middle of their desk every day, regardless of whether or not the plan is to use it. They have protractors, they have rulers, they have patty paper, they have any tool they can think of, and they know they can sort through them, and what they might use is not what the neighbor might use. And it's really interesting to watch them think through which tool is the best for what they're doing. Now, the hardest one for teachers, the hardest one is avoid over-helping or helping too early. It's so easy to look at a group of kids that are kind of stuck and try to guide them down the pathway. But what we want to do is allow them to get to that pathway themselves. Now, of course, if you've got non-productivity, kids not on task at all, they may need some extra guidance, but letting kids wait to intervene. Watch what they're doing, listen to what they're doing before you intervene what they're doing. And when you do intervene, try to focus on using questions instead of using statements. So that way you're asking the kids what they think they should do or how they think they should approach it instead of telling them. And learning when to do this, when to question, when to wait is definitely a challenge. It's still something I'm working on, and I work on every single day. And that's why reflecting is such an important part of implementing productive struggle. You have to sit down and think about, where did my students struggle? What do they need to do differently next time? What do I need to do differently next time for this process to continue to improve? So the last 2 slides I have to share with you are available, are to help you with these last 2 things: questioning and learning how to reflect. So these are samples of questions that I've pulled from class that I use pretty consistently, and I've made them pretty general so they can be applied to any subject, any teacher, any content. And another thing that I have started doing just this year, so it's only 2 weeks in, is putting these questions on a piece of paper at the student groups. That way the students can also be asking each other these questions, and it has really elevated the amount of work and conversation and math discourse and struggle that I'm seeing even within the kids, because they're asking each other, wait a second, why does that work? Can you explain it? And it's really awesome. And there are many more question stems out there available. This is just a small sample for people to use in their classrooms. And the last slide I have to share with you guys is reflecting. As we all know, teaching is such a reflective practice. You have to always be thinking about what happened, how did it go, what did my students learn, but not only having teachers reflect, but have students reflect. So sometimes our ticket out the door will have nothing to do with math. It'll be, how did your thinking compare to your partner's thinking? And they have to explain what was alike in their thinking and was different in their thinking. Really getting them to hone in on that productive struggle. What part of the task was difficult for you? And then really focusing on this, working through the struggle. What did you do to work through it? And kids will surprise you with the awesome reflections that they'll have. I really thought it was difficult because I couldn't read through the problem, and it was great that I could open up the dictionary on my computer and look up some of the words I didn't know, and it helped me get through it. So things like that, and they help us see where our students are, and that's so important. And then reflecting as a teacher, what struggles did you see? How did allowing kids to work through the struggle help you see misconceptions that they might have? So for example, I had a student the other day in class that was explaining that they knew there were 360 degrees in a circle, and when they rotated something halfway, that would be a 90-degree turn. And it really highlighted to me as they were talking, wait, you know how many degrees in a circle, you know halfway is what you turned, but why are you saying that's 90? And it helps us highlight another misconception, that struggle, and getting them to explain their thinking. helped me to see the other misconception that they weren't connecting the amount of degrees to the amount of turn that was happening with the shape. So when you question students and when you talk to students and when you really get to see what they're thinking and what they're doing, it amplifies the success you can have in your classroom. And like I said at the very beginning, this is not something that's super easy to implement. It does take time. There will be days where, there are days for me where I think, why am I letting them talk this much? Why am I not just telling them what to do? And it becomes clear when you have the successful days, because you see that self-efficacy, because you see the confidence, and because you see greater participation from students. And I agree with Peggy, who just said, and they remember it so much better when they have a chance to explain their thinking. That's very true. Giving students the forum and making it truly a student-centered classroom that supports a safe environment for productive struggle can change the way your classroom is. And with that, our next presenter is going to talk about how Waggle from Triumph Learning promotes productive struggle in the classroom as well. Thank you.
And before we do that, I'd love to see who we have here in our audience. If you guys could do me a favor and go ahead and pick a role that best describes your work in schools so that we can get a good idea of who we have in our audience. I've only collected about 3 questions, so I know we had brilliant presenters, and they were all, yes, very informative. But if you have any questions, we have a lot of time left, and Aoife's going to talk for a little, but we can have a nice, healthy Q&A at the end of this session. So please do type in the chat window and send me some of your questions, and I'll have them posted for our presenters. I'm going to keep this open for a little bit longer. I know there's a lot more of you here. Okay, I'm going to close the voting now. Thank you so much. And I'm going to kick it over to Aoife.
Hello, everybody. Today, I'd love to talk to you about our new product, Waggle. It's a smart practice program for math and ELA grades 3 to 8. A lot of what you'll hear about Waggle sounds like it's been poached from the previous presenter, but in truth, we've worked closely with Clarke County on developing Waggle. We didn't just want to develop another EdTech product. We really wanted to get to the heart of how students are learning and how teachers are managing the variety of students in their classroom. So Waggle is the output of all that work. So I'm happy to present it to you today. So before we get started, I just want to talk about a little about the philosophy that we have. And I'm just going to actually read this to you because it's something that we believe very strongly in. Waggle is about creating a practice space where in-the-moment instruction meets personalized pathways. And this will lead, we believe, to building confidence through productive struggle and accelerating student achievement. So while this is very, may sound very complicated, let's break those down a little bit. You heard Dr. Lanoue talk about the significance of personalized pathways, and this is really key to what Waggle is about. Most programs in EdTech claim to be adaptive. This usually means that they use branching techniques, where what they care about is really whether the student got the question right or whether the student got it wrong. We believe there's much more to investigate than just right and wrong. We want to understand what preferences the student has, what support the student leveraged, and as well as how they've performed in the past. So Waggle is about really digging into the learning process, not just about the end result. The other element when we talk about is in the moment instruction. And a lot of what Dr. Lanoue was talking about was this stop-start kind of motion where you would assess a student, then you would stop. Then you would instruct a student, and then you would stop. And then you would let them practice, and then you would stop. And then you would maybe rinse and repeat. But in all of that, what that means is there are lots of breaks in the process. And we wanted to provide this much more dynamic, fluid environment where each kid can get exactly what they need when they need it. So they're not beholden to the class in general, and they can advance at their own pace. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means as we go through the program. So the bottom line with Waggle is to say that every student is different and has different needs. So this is percolated throughout everything with Waggle. Every student will need different interventions. They'll need different supports. And Waggle really aims to provide that to them. When we talk about productive struggle, this is a really important element for Waggle, because we want to give students a safe place to practice. Almost all EdTech products focus on the assessment component, which is concerned about whether a student gets an answer right or wrong. We believe and also the other side effect of when students are in assessment products, they really are afraid to avail of the supports that are in the system because they know there's a score and the stakes are high. What we want to do is actually take the focus a little bit away from the assessment. We want to provide this safe environment that allows students to fail upwards, if you like, or to kind of allow them to get back on the bike when they fall off. So they may not know the answer, but they can avail of the tools, the supports, and the system is advancing them forward. We also want to give them the opportunity to grapple with the content and to kind of give them content that's maybe slightly beyond their reach and letting them reach for it, so that they can have these exciting breakthrough moments in learning, and that they're not just worrying about the assessment hanging over their head. All of this is to say then that, if you practice smart, the idea would be that they're prepared then for any assessment that we can throw at them. So let's shift gears a little bit now, and I'm just going to show you how all these kind of lofty concepts come together into a product that can support the teacher. There are two kind of facets to a program like this. One is the student experience and the other is the teacher experience. So let me just dig a little bit into the student experience. In a practice environment, you want students you want to encourage them to engage with the content. You want them to try. And this is very different from, as I was saying, assessing. So we use engagement opportunities as a very powerful tool to promote that behavior. What you're going to see here, this is the student dashboard. You see the concept of the lift meter here on the right. And what that is, it's the currency of the system, essentially. Everything you do in the system allows you to earn feet traveled. Even if you don't get the question right, you're still engaging with the content, you're accessing the hints, you're accessing the feedback. Some moment of learning is happening and we want to reward you for that. We also have sorry about that. We also have the concept of Cloudy. You see here, Cloudy is the guide on the side. He is the voice of Waggle, and he encourages you as you're moving through the system. So if you're a third grader, Cloudy speaks to you in very supportive and direct terms. But if you're in 8th grade, Cloudy has a much more age-appropriate vocabulary, and he's very much a little sassier and has a little more edge to him, and I think 8th grade students appreciate that. Similarly, we have this concept of flocks released here, and this is, you have the students that are grappling with the content, but you also have the concept of, we want to encourage students to not access the hints and feedback if they don't need them. So we've developed this notion of you can release flocks in the system, and this is like a turkey in bowling. So when you get a streak of questions right in a row without accessing hints or support, sports, you can release a flock of pigs. And basically, this is a kind of another delightful element that allows students to revel in the fact that they've achieved something really productive. The other element here I'm just going to call to your attention is the goals acquired. So we want to make sure that students are becoming consciously competent learners. They're not just clicking through the questions to get out of the screen, that we want them to be conscious of what they're actually learning and what they're doing. So goals acquired basically is all the goals that they've mastered, and it's a ticker that shows them how great they are in terms of all the goals they've acquired. It's also a way for them to review goals where they may have forgotten things, and it allows them to kind of do some preparatory work if needed. So while all that is fun and engaging and designed to keep students interested in the program, we also here in the main screen you'll see the goals that have been assigned by the teacher to the student. A teacher does not have to worry about items or questions. I'll show you what that looks like in the next screen, but really a teacher assigns a goal, and then a goal is made up of a number of skills. So here you have the skill wheel here, which tells you how many skills you've mastered out of a goal. I should mention here that Waggle is all about scores and not about, or the opposite, all about skill acquisition and not about scores. So essentially we want them to focus on the acquisition of those skills and not necessarily what grade they've accomplished. So that's an essential component to this. So let me take you now into the next, into the actual question. So when you click in the goal, you will be, as a student, you'll be offered a question. Now, we have brought together, Triumph has been known for its content for quite a long time, but one of the things we did when we developed Waggle was we looked around the EdTech space and said, who are the best partners we can work with that can provide this, the optimal experience to our students. What that means is, what we did is we basically partnered with Newton. Many of you may already have heard of Newton. They are essentially an education recommendation engine. So Newton is like the wizard that sits behind these questions and takes all the information that the student has provided in order to provide this precise question that the student needs. And that's a very important point when we were talking about personalized pathways. It basically gets you to the precise question that you need at that precise moment, based on not just whether you got it right or wrong, but also what your preferences are and what supports you've accessed and your proficiency also in the past. So when you go into a question that the system has recommended to you, all the kind of supports go back into the background. So you have all the engagement elements. It's just you and the question essentially. We have 11 item types in Waggle that range from drag and drops, hotspots, multi-selects. There's a long list of them, and they're based. They're derived from the Park and Smarter Balance item list. But what we have done here is we've created the engagement component is with the question. So Waggle asks you a question, and then it actually allows you to really explore that question. So you have here, you make a selection. You don't have a submit button like a typical assessment product would have. You have a check my answer button. So again, it's taking that pressure off the student, and it gives the student feedback based on how they've answered the question. So you'll see here is an example of this feedback. It says take another look. It's not, as Christina was saying, you never tell the student you're wrong. This is basically the same vein. It's basically saying take another look. It will tell you if you've gotten it partially right. It will give you feedback. It will never give you the answer, but it will prompt you to think critically about why have you thought about it this way. Just kind of having you trying to nudge you into thinking about it another way to get the answer right. There could be up to 15 pieces of feedback for each question, depending on what the question demands. So no two students may get completely different interactions with a single question because of how they've answered the question. So that's an important element. The other aspect here too is hints. Each of the hints, again, is there for the students to use. They can access that support whenever they need it. And again, each question can have up to 5 hints. So all this is to say you can have 20 different pieces of content or instructional moments with each particular question, which is again, when we talk about dynamic in the moment instruction, this is what we mean. You're being assessed, you're practicing, you're getting instruction all at that exact moment when you need it, and different students have access to that as they need it. Okay, so now I just want to switch gears a little bit to the teacher side. So while that is all well and good, is that like a boatload of work for teachers? And we just want to kind of explain how that's going to work. So when we talk about the teacher experience, the problem that we heard clearly from Clarke County and other districts that we're working with was very much around, I can't take another thing, my teachers are overloaded, we have no time, I can't be cobbling together pieces of data to give me a picture of where my students are. So we took that extremely seriously, and we built out a very very easy accessible reporting mechanism. The other thing is it's not good enough to say where my students are. You want to provide those insights into what students are doing. Are they changing their strategies? How are they growing? How are they interacting with the system? Like, we need to go a level deeper and not just be sitting on the surface with the outcome of the outcome. We want to know more about the process. So this is essentially what the teacher dashboard is, and this is all about surfacing data to the teachers. What we have here on the right hand side is what we call the goal map, or it's been called the curriculum map. These are the goals, and the arrows connote the prerequisites for each goal, so a teacher can see how all the goals fit together. Essentially, a teacher would assign these goals to the student, and then they would show up on the student dashboard. The other thing we wanted to do is really focus on on surfacing that data when they need it. So you have 2 minutes, you're coming into your class, I want to see what are the skills I need to watch, where are my kids stuck, where are my kids exhibiting like a lot of effort but are not getting anywhere, who are the strugglers, who are the excelling people, and I have everything here, it's all surfaced for you. The other thing I just want to mention is, everything is in plain language to really, disarm we know that teachers are not these master statisticians. They have other things, important things to do. So making it really easy for them to understand. So what are my students working on? Like, we've created this mechanism. It's like Google Maps, where you have high traffic, show traffic. So you can click on this filter here and you can see what are my students working on? Where are they? What topics are they grappling with? And again, the filters also cover things like how likely are they to complete in the goal. So it allows you to really provide that predictive moment for teachers and allow them to intervene before the moment has passed or the assessment has come upon them. Moving on then, I'm just going to take you a little bit down through the reports. Everything, as I was saying, is about surfacing. So when you look at the skills to watch here as an example, we don't want to take you out of the context of what you're working in. A lot of criticism that we've heard from teachers about all products pretty much is that you're offered so much information, you drill in and you lose where you are. And this is particularly difficult difficult for teachers that maybe not as digitally oriented as others, may not have the time, so we've put a lot of work into making sure that that data is very easily accessible. So here's an example of where you have 16 skills are basically, you've got the class working on this, their high grit skills, so there's a lot of effort putting in, but they're not actually yielding the results. So this would be something you would want to drill into. You click on the skill that you have an issue with, and you have this concept of the battery meter here. We have aligned our proficiency into 5 different levels, and that proficiency was represented in the battery meter. You can see here it's at on average overall, it's on a pretty low level. So you would want to intervene here. You would click on that and it would open up a panel for you where you could do a number of things. You can see your students, you can see the grit level, you can see the proficiency. So let me talk to you a little bit for a second about grit, because this I think is something that is the key to the insight into beyond just the outcome. With the grit, how we're basically calculating grit, we're taking the proficiency itself, but we're also taking the hints accessed, the active time in the system, the amount of review questions that have been accessed. So a number of factors to kind of go into calculating this level of engagement or persistence in the system. We believe that when you put that persistence with the proficiency, you get a much more richer view of what the student is struggling with. So here you have an example of, where you can have a student with high grit and partial proficiency. You know that they're putting the effort in, but they're not yielding the results. So that would be an intervention moment for the teacher very clearly. If you have low grit and low proficiency, again, you would want to kind of handle that in a different way. You might encourage the student to get into the system a little bit more and to put a little bit more of application in the product. So this is essentially, in this product, grit plays a big role in calculating that, and grit is always reported at the skill level. So a student that might exhibit high grit in one skill might exhibit low grit in another, but grit and proficiency basically go hand in hand. So moving on then, the bottom line here is that so we make everything very visual and make the data very accessible. We put everything in plain English language here so that teachers don't have to go hunting and pecking for the answers. And last but not least, I'll just talk to you a little bit about differentiation. And I think differentiation is the magic word. This is where we're not about replacing what the teacher is doing in the classroom, but really extending their reach in the classroom to the variety of levels that their students are at. So we wanted to provide an easy way to allow teachers to take action very easily to either students, groups, or classes, and to make sure that they get the help that they need when they need it. So that is our whistle-stop tour of Waggle. Thank you very much for allowing me to present it to you. And then Sam, I'll turn it back to you for questions.
I think Eva got a little cut off, but she was thanking you for listening to her and the rest of the Waggle presentation. I'm going to start posting some questions that you guys had. Eva, I'm going to start with some questions for you while it's fresh. So if you could start broadcasting again, I am going to display the first question.
So Waggle. I'm getting feedback there.
I'm going to.
Okay, so Waggle, you can get Waggle, you can go to our website at triumphlearning.com. There you can take a demo of Waggle and it can get you into the process, and we can get you familiarized with Waggle. So again, the URL is triumphlearning.com. Yeah, so Waggle has been designed right now to be in use, with a teacher at the helm to monitor to monitor like what the class is doing, but there's no reason why a parent couldn't use it at the home. Teachers from an after-school program, Waggle is absolutely designed for after-school use, so definitely one of the key use cases in implementation has been to have Waggle in use after school. No, the program is for grades 3 to 8. First off, we are aggressively adding grades 1 and 2 as well. So that's where we're at in terms of the grade level support. But we expect those grades 1 and 2 to be in probably around Q1 of 2015. I think there are many different programs, in the EdTech space. A lot that are claiming that they're adaptive, but in terms of the high school students, I'm not as familiar with the high school area in terms of how students would be interacting with those from an older point of view.
So that was your last question, Aoife. I can speak to high school a little bit. If you'll stop broadcasting, Aoife, I'm echoing. So for high school students, I could also suggest that because we have 8th grade content in there that does remediate, you could assign goals at the 8th grade level, especially in the early algebra standards that exist in the Common Core curriculum. But we are investigating ideas about pushing 8th grade to a kind of a higher depth of knowledge and including questions that really get our advanced and accelerating learners involved in more productive struggle in that space. So you're going to see that also at the start, probably at the start of next year. So Dr. Lanoue, there's one question here for you. If you could jump on for just a second.
Okay, question is what can be done after school to close the gap? Let me start by saying this. Our focus has been primarily to get it done during the day. And so the first thing I'd say before I say what can be done after school is are you really disaggregating data and you're really pinpointing what students' needs are in a standards-based environment. So with that said, I think we have to look at a different term and not after school, that really our kids are learning 24/7. So, whether it's an after school program or after school or at home or in the evening, I think that's where we begin to provide the tools for one that students can certainly do that kind of work aligned to standards. And what I would do is I would isolate it because I don't think you ought to give them general pieces. I would use data to sort of pinpoint where those gaps are. But I'd also encourage that our students talk to one another. I think they want to be a collaborative of experts, and I think that's a really helpful tool. So I think rather than after school, look 24/7, how can we have kids access their learning through digital tools?
Thank you, Dr. Lanoue. So Christina, you have a lot of questions. I'm going to put the first one up in just a second, and then you can start broadcasting. But one of the questions I think a couple of people had asked is, are there any professional books to recommend, RE Productive Struggle? There has been a book recommended by Ms. Cho in the text, and there's also a study done at the U of T down in Texas about productive struggle in mathematics in middle school, and that's also in the chat. So I will make sure to repost those for you. And then, Christina, if you could jump on, I'm going to fire questions at you if you don't mind.
No, I can't see a question yet. Oh, there it goes. What do you do if kids put incomplete answers? So incomplete answers are definitely a jumping off point, and you'll get a lot of incomplete answers, especially when you start productive struggle. Because for a lot of kids, if they don't think they're going to put down the correct answer, they don't want to put down anything because they don't want to be chastised or embarrassed for not knowing. So a response that I would give to I forgot how to do it is, well, what do you remember about this topic? Let's start there. We are doing a unit on transformations, and the way we started the unit in class is we threw up a coordinate plane, said, what do you know about this? We threw up some shapes, What do you know about this? So getting students to even share anything they know and then building on that is definitely a way you can address incomplete answers from the beginning, and hopefully you will see growth in kids as they gain confidence. This is definitely a tough one, and it's class by class. It depends on how many students you have that are engaging in this off-task non-productivity. It can sometimes be solved with just a conversation with 1 to 2 students. It may have to be a whole class conversation about, why do you think we're doing this? What's the point in struggling to learn something? What do you learn from struggling versus me just telling you what to do, and really getting them to see the point of problem solving? It may take working in small groups with individual students and showing them what struggle looks like, modeling what thinking looks like with the class, and continued off-task behavior is going to disrupt no matter if you're working with the productive struggle or you're just hosting a regular class. It'll be similar situation, so I guess having a good classroom management plan. But it is the hardest part of dealing with productive struggle, is how to deal with the kids who aren't doing what they need to be doing. Our school district in Clarke County has worked a lot with our local community to decrease students who are absent. And one of the things that will really help with this and has helped with this is our rollout of one-to-one technology and having students having the capability of having their device at home. We do a lot of our learning digitally, and students can work from different locations, and it also can allow us just to communicate with students via email, let them know what they're missing. But using the productive struggle model and teaching them how to do it is definitely something that has to be forged in class. The students, when you first start, need the teacher there to guide them through the process to kind of curtail frustration. Besides the books that have been mentioned from Samantha, there is actually a website out there for math that's called Productive Struggle. I think it's .com, maybe .org, and it was started by a math blogger who has teachers post the errors their student makes in class, and other teachers comment on the errors that have been made and how to address them and how to promote student thinking with them. So that's an interesting site. But I know this, oh, there it is. Thank you, Celeste, mathmistakes.org. So that's a nice site for math teachers to look at. There are, I'm sure, continued professional developments that will take place. I've heard this productive struggle concept being talked about a lot more frequently in different professional communities. One of the things to address students who are worried, who get worried when they're questioned and they're frightened and they don't like it, which is definitely common. They think as soon as you ask them a question, they must be wrong, which is not true. But is doing it in small groups. So students are working on a task or a problem in class, and you're asking them the questions. And as I'm walking around to the groups, I'm cataloging their responses in my mind and kind of ordering them to how do I want to have them present it to the class. And that way I already kind of know what they're going to say. I already know the strategy they did. And so when they share with the whole class, it's in a sequenced format of, I know this kid started the process and I know this other group finished the process. So when they share with the class, the order of their presenting makes sense. Celeste, this is also a very difficult one. I teach 8th graders, and as most of us know with middle school students, listening respectfully is not something they've honed in on as a skill yet. One of the ways we do is we really have a lot of conversations at the beginning of the year about classroom norms and what does it look like to be respectful, and Why is it important to hear other students talking? And one thing I do, for better or for worse, is I do not repeat what a student has said. If they want to hear it and they want to learn it, it's the other student that's going to explain them to them. And having students stand up and share like a teacher would, instead of just always sharing from their seats. Having them come up to the board and show a diagram, and using questioning to help students stay on track. I try to limit the amount of time students are talking, because sometimes when their thinking is a little out there, it can really get students confused. So intervening with questions as they're talking is really important. I think the resources question is probably better directed to Samantha and some of the things she shared. And I know there's stuff being shared within the chat right now that answers resources. But this productive struggle is something I implement in all of my classes. I teach support math and on-level math and advanced math. And so students who are performing at below grade level are definitely capable of working in productive struggle, but it may take them longer to get there. Actually, you know what, now that I say that, it probably takes them equal amount of time as advanced students. They have different situations. So students who are in support often aren't confident in what they do, and students who are in advanced math are often too confident in what they do. And so getting them engaged in productive struggle is equally as challenging. And just encouraging the conversation, making sure they know it's a safe spot, talking to them one-on-one and not always making them share their thinking with the group, and that can help gain their confidence. If they know that you approve of what they've said one-on-one or in a small group, they're more confident in sharing it with the group. Similar to the last question, some of the on-level and support classes I teach are also collaborative math settings or have special ed students in them. And the same thing applies, where the working with special needs students, making sure, and students who need support, making sure that they have resources that will help them, giving them vocabulary ahead of time, showing them where to find resources either on their computers or in their math textbooks or in their interactive notebooks or anything is really key. Helping them stay organized, showing them how to use the tools, and building their confidence as you would any other student.
Thanks, Christina. I think that's your last one. Aoife, if you could jump back on, there's 2 more questions about Waggle.
I'm here. So we have different payment models that work with you and what your needs are in the district. So if you wanted to go to triumphlearning.com, you would be able to see the breakout of the cost structure. We have different models for Waggle. We have the practice and assessment model, which is what I showed you today. But we also have a practice and instruct component that includes instructional content and lessons that Triumph has created that's part of that, that is also available. So that there are different models available for depending on the product and depending on your needs and your interests. So if you go to triumphlearning.com, you'll see that. Yes, Waggle is definitely Common Core, has been built on the Common Core. While I've talked very much about how Waggle is skill-based, we very much built the content from the ground up with the rigor of the Common Core in mind. So none of the content that you see in Waggle comes from any repurposed application in the practice component. It's very much built from the ground up, and it's all built with the rigor and the item types that the Common Core supports in mind.
Thanks, Aoife.